So I run the cloud products for HP. I'm 6 months at HP. Before that, I was general manager for Windows Azure at Microsoft. What I'm going to talk about for 25 minutes is three things. One is hybrid. I spent a lot of time on hybrid scenarios and some of the things that we're doing at HP around hybrid. And then I'm going to share a little bit around what we're doing with open source and OpenStack, and to kind of sort of tee off some of the comments earlier about the trends in cloud computing and open source. And then at the end, which I do want to get to, share a whole bunch of landmines that I stepped on over the past 5 years. So that's usually the most helpful part of any talk like this, of the things that other people screwed up. And I did a lot of those throughout my time at Microsoft. And before Windows Azure, I used to run the Windows Server business. And so I'm going to talk a lot about enterprise scenarios in particular, and how cloud computing is meeting those scenarios. And I will touch on a little bit of what it is like to run a service like Windows Azure. And that's where a lot of the landmines came in. So I'll just jump right into it. So one of the things I spend a lot of time on with customers is trying to explain what I believe hybrid cloud computing means, and then understand what they believe it means. And so many times people just define hybrid as a VPN, an IPsec connection between two machines, or sending a message over a bus between two applications. And really the experience that you all have today, this is just a logical diagram. I spent a lot of time at Microsoft, so you're going to get slides with animations for 25 minutes. So in this, you can't really see the details of it, but you all have done something like this. You use an app on your phone, you go through, you look for it, and this is a real example that I just made a logical diagram. Healthcare company was trying to reduce their costs, make patient scheduling self-service, and it's all very seamless. They go through, they find a doctor, they log in, they pick a time, and they schedule. This is a real application. I just couldn't show the particular customer for a bunch of reasons. But behind the scenes, as some of you who have built things like this before, there's a lot going on. And this is really a hybrid application scenario. So behind the scenes, this client-side application is communicating with a public cloud in different components, software components. I'm not getting into PUE or other hardware things in this 25 minutes. And it's then communicating back through a provider network and then down to a private cloud. And there's a lot of interaction here going on, and a lot of orchestration that's happening between the application and the different systems as it communicates across these different environments. You can replace this with any sort of scenario. I've seen this at airline companies. I've seen it at financial institutions, hotel chains that need to use a public cloud infrastructure to reach back into their systems of record because maybe the application can't move, the data can't move. Could be security, regulatory, compliance reasons why things can't leave the premises. And what we typically see is the app builder, the developer, sees this infrastructure. They see a mobile backend as a service in a public cloud, and they find techniques or methods to communicate with those systems that are still on premise or behind another firewall. But the IT side is a little different because it's not just enough to have APIs. I love when people say, we're in an API economy. I'm like, that's awesome, but there's a whole bunch behind the API that really still matters. And so from the IT point of view, you still have to provide not just a runtime or an application host or the ability to run that app, but it needs to have an infrastructure behind it that can scale horizontally or vertically if needed. It needs to have backup, recovery, and security and all the things that still matter. And it has to have the ability to securely connect to those other assets that you have either in a private cloud or in a third-party network. So this is a bit of the impedance mismatch that I have seen repeatedly working with customers trying to build hybrid cloud solutions, trying to build user experiences like this where a mobile app or any client-side application is trying to communicate through different types of infrastructures. Where the developer goes right at it, says, hey, I'm going to build an app. I might use AWS or Azure, and I'll use some of the tools and techniques in that cloud environment to touch things behind the firewall. And what's happening is that first wave of cloud computing, really driven, in my opinion, by AWS and Salesforce, I believe, really kind of penetrated the market, created a new way of looking at IT, of abstracting IT as a service. And now we're in a phase where a lot of enterprises are saying, how does that apply to me? Exactly the question was asked earlier by I think Ralph over there of why do I matter? Why does this matter to me? And a lot of the mismatch is some of the new styles of working, the new techniques of working, trying to be absorbed or operated in a traditional model. And that's where a lot of the conflict is happening today. So this scenario here, when someone was building this, they had to take a step back and say, I don't want to build it just for this patient scheduling application, even though that was the driver they were trying to push for. How could I do this in a way where that right side of the slide is something that's repeatable for any type of application scenario like this? So maybe it's a dental record instead of or a dentist instead of a doctor that they want to communicate with, or some other scenario. So this has been I mean, when people say hybrid, it's really happening. This is a nice study that they released at Structure last year in San Francisco. It showed just distribution of private, public, and hybrid. And in 5 years, hybrid's gonna lead. So when you think about this, what does that mean? If people are trying to bring together their traditional assets they may have already monetized or that are critical to them, with the new way of working in a public cloud. And what's happened, in my view, is IT has gotten a lot smarter since the AWS and Salesforce drivers early on to drive cloud computing and infrastructure as a service. So when I was working on Windows Azure, we started off as a pure platform as a service. Does anyone use Windows Azure in here? Don't feel bad, I don't work there anymore. So like all right, now a few more hands popped up. I didn't even know we sold Sri and EcoPod at HP, so don't feel bad. We started as a platform as a service, pure PaaS, and it was a very, very customized system. I mean, really customized. It had a hypervisor that was not Hyper-V. So hypervisor specifically designed for Windows Azure. That actually only ran on one type of processor that was not Intel. Long story there, maybe over the beers later I can tell you that story. But a really custom system designed for at-scale PaaS services and designed initially for stateless applications. So now think about the market opportunity for all you guys in enterprise. Like, how many of you have stateless applications that could run horizontally, that could run in a multi-tenant environment and then never write to disk? I mean, how many have, just go ahead, raise a hand. Not a lot. So it was great for people who are doing file new, building a brand new app. They wanted really, really high horizontal scale, and they had no dependencies from a traditional app or a traditional way of working. So that was great. We were excited. As computer scientists at Microsoft, we felt like we were raising the bar for the industry. We were building black boxes that people could program to, and everything was going to get better. You never SSH or RDP'd into a machine again. You didn't even know what a virtual machine was or an operating system. You're building to black boxes. It's a wonderful world. I think, Chris, I pitched you once at Microsoft when you came and told you this whole story. Now, the problem with that is we looked across the water. I live in Seattle, home of the Super Bowl champions, by the way. We're very proud. That was the first Super Bowl ever for the city. We're very proud. We looked across the water over Lake Washington, and another company was closing in on $1 billion in revenue just doing infrastructure as a service, hosted VMs over the internet. Basically, that's all they had at the time. Microsoft is really, really profit hungry, and we hate when people make $1 billion. It's not us. So we said, well, wait a minute, we're raising the bar for everyone. We're building this platform as a service thing. This is the new style of IT. This is the way you should build apps in the future. The problem is we're way too far ahead of the market. And the rest of the market who wasn't building Snapchat or Instagram or something from file new, the rest of the market who had traditional apps that were very vertically scalable said, how do I get from here to there? I don't understand this. How am I going to move my old stuff or even take my old processes and make it work in that world? And this is really what has stemmed the hybrid phenomenon, not just for us at HP, but for many people in the industry. And the reason you've heard the word used so frequently just today, and that's driving a lot of new thinking about how do you bring the old to the new. So fundamentally, I loved my job at Microsoft. It was great. I was very happy. Actually, the guy I used to work for just became the CEO, Satya Nadella. Great guy, by the way. And one of the reasons I joined HP was I fundamentally believed we were going to see a repeat of what happened in the very beginning of the internet, that a lot of open technologies were going to change the way that people were going to use clouds as clouds started becoming more hybrid. And the driver of that, if any of you use, how many of you use AWS? Let me do the survey here. A few more hands went up. A lot of hands went up. The more you use AWS or pure public clouds, the more that you use something like Azure or even Google App Engine, you'll see that they've become increasingly more proprietary. Nothing wrong with that at all. There's nothing wrong with that. There's great value in AWS. I run some of my own apps in AWS. but they have become increasingly more proprietary. There's a reason, a strategy behind that. It's not accidental. It's not accidental that DynamoDB doesn't run on-premise on a Linux machine that you can buy. That's not accidental. And as I saw that, I believe that enterprises in particular were going to say, I can't go all in. I can't do a burn-to-boat strategy. It's not only the public cloud. That's a great design pattern, and I will use it, but it will be used as a tool amongst other tools in my portfolio.